everyone. So this month we'll be talking about the Module 2 of April. My name is Daniela General Cizosa, and the subject is CA 200 Institutional Corrections. So the contents of this Module 2 is Sing Sing Prison, Auburn System, their history, philosophy, and objectives of imprisonment and the development of prison. So we have Pennsylvania system, then 5 deployment of prisoners, then the forms of punishment, then age of enlightenment in relation to institutional corrections. Then we have the important personalities behind correctional institutions such as Cesar Beccaria, Cesar Lombroso, uh, William the Conqueror, Enrico Ferri, and Clifford Shaw. So our first topic is about Sing Sing Prison. So Sing Sing Prison, in full name, is Sing Sing Correctional Facility. So it is a maximum security prison located in Ossining, New York, or Ossining, New York. In use since 1826, it is one of the oldest penal institutions in the United States. So Sing Sing Prison is one of the first prison institutions or penal institutions across United States. It is also among the most well-known in the country, especially notable for its harsh conditions in the 19th and 20th century. So their punishment, their system are famous. So yeah. It was designed to provide additional prison space and to replace Newgate prison. So Newgate became overcrowded, so they established and designed Sing Sing prison to accommodate new inmates. Construction was undertaken in 1825 by convict laborers. So what do you mean by this? So the convicts are the ones who build the buildings or the facilities in the prison under the supervision of Elam Lins. So Elam Lins is the warden of Sing Sing prison. But prior to that, he was also an Auburn State prison warden. So before he was hired to Sing Sing prison, he was already have an experience in supervising and managing prison. So the 4-story complex was soon 6 stories. So this was under Elam Lins. And the prison eventually housed more than 1,600 inmates. So the prison became bigger and bigger as the time goes by. And we all know that New York is a mega city. Even before, up to now, it is a big city. So the population is high, and then the crimes and offenders are also increasing, so they created more prison to accommodate the offenders. So Elam Lins, he officially became head of the new prison when it opened in 1826, though it was not completed until 1828. The initial facility had 80 cells, so it was a very small complex before, until Elam Lins became the warden, and he introduced the convict labor to convicts. Lins resigned as warden of Sing Sing in 1830 and returned to Auburn in 1838. For some reason, he resigned, but he returned to become a warden in Auburn. He was asked to leave that prison a year later after the death of a prisoner who was punished severely for feigning illness. So Elam Lins was a famous, he was known as a strict and disciplined warden. and he was an ex-military person. So he introduced different discipline ways to control and discipline the inmates. So whippings and floggings were commonplace punishments at Sing Sing. So frequently used was the cat o' nine tails. So this is the cat o' nine tails, an illustration of what it looks like, and a cruel whipping contraption whose lashes were often tipped with metal or barbs. So at the tip of the cat o' nine tails, there is a metal or a barbs. So if you whip it, the prisoner would get uh, wounded by it. Its use was finally abolished by the New York State Legislature in 1848. So it is a brutal way of punishing a prisoner for misbehaving and misconduct, or just anything that would not fit the warden's order. So you will get whipped by this cat o' nine tails. So there's some reason why they do that. With the advent of the electric chair in 1891, Sing Sing became notorious for its execution. So as the times goes by, their punishment also became excruciating and brutal. So from whippings and floggings, they moved to electric chair in 1891. Sing Sing was also the site of reforms that affected the national penal system. So reformer Thomas Mott Osborne, who developed his penology theories while voluntarily incarcerated for a year at Auburn, served as Sing Sing's warden in 1914 to 1915 and 1916. So after Elam Leeds, he also became the warden of Sing Sing prison. So he introduced reforms that is more friendly than Elam Leeds. So mas human ang iyang ways of supervising and managing the prison. More reforms were instituted under Louis Edward Laws, who served as warden from 1920 to 1941. So that's a long time of being a warden in Sing Sing prison. He notably improved the living conditions with the prison and within the prison, and allowed inmates to participate in sports. So after Thomas Mott Osborne, his reformations and other activities, he came Louis Edward Laws, who also notably improved the conditions of the system in Sing Sing prison. So their living conditions are improving and upgrading, which allow inmates to participate in sports. So he introduced sports that would allow inmates to be more productive. So what are the programs in Sing Sing prison? So we have the following programs by the Sing Sing prison. We have alcohol and substance abuse treatment programs. So if the inmates is having trouble, alcoholic and substance abuse, they have these treatment programs. So anger management programs, if the inmates have anger issues and difficulty to manage their emotions, then they have this kind of program. Then educational, vocational programs. So inmates also have the rights to get educated as a as a person. So they can get non-formal or formal education from inside the prison. Then family development programs. This help them to reconnect with their family and the relationship within the family. Guidance and counseling services. Then library and law library services. So they have a library. they are allowed to access libraries, then recreational programs, sports, religious services. So they have the right to practice their religion inside the prison. Sex offender treatment programs, temporary release programs, then trauma programs, transitional services programs, and veterans programs. Then we have the volunteer services and programs. So number 2 is the Auburn system. So Auburn State Prison or Auburn State Prison was located in Auburn, New York. So it's still in New York. Opened in 1816. So it established a disciplinary and administrative system based on silence, corporal punishment, and congregate or group labor. So primarily they are on based on silence. So discipline kayo ang mga prisoners ani because they are not allowed to talk or communicate with their fellow inmates or prisoners. Uh, they have corporal punishment, then congregate or group labor. Then in architecture and routine, Auburn became the model for prisons throughout the United States. So as being a model, so this prison is very established because it became the model prisons throughout or across the United States. It became an inspiration to other prisons. In the early 19th century, many Americans believed that industrialization and dramatic demographic, economic, and political upheavals and conspired against the traditional controls of family, church, and the community. So their solution was to create the penitentiary, a new institution for reforming offenders and ultimately restoring social stability. So they had created a solution that would make the offenders stop their misbehavior or their offending activities or committing crimes. So they would reflect, then reform themselves, and then eventually come back to society as a productive individual or citizen. So Auburn system. The establishment of a second New York State prison at Auburn in 1816 soon led to a new prison model and regime designed to keep convicts separate and unable to communicate with each other even as they were forced to labor as penal slaves. So their objective here is solitary confinement. So the inmates are not able to or not allowed to talk to their fellow inmates. They cannot communicate, they cannot go near to them. They are only see their guards just briefly a day. Then they're back to doing work. So they are workers. So industry, obedience, and silence. That's their were the guiding principles of the system. So industry is they have workshops inside the prison. Uh, the inmates as workers, they are making, for example, shoemaking. They manufacture products inside the prison, then weaving and other stuff that would let them earn money and contract with a private company. Obedience, so they are very controlled and disciplined in a way. And silence, as I said, they are not allowed to communicate with other inmates. So each entering convict was assigned a prison number. So this will be served as their identification number, which serve as his or her identity. So movement to and from the workshops was performed in a regimented manner known as the lockstep. which called for prisoners to march in a military-style human chain. So if I'm correct, Elam Linds was the one who introduced lockstep, since he was also a warden in Auburn State Prison. So he introduced this kind of way or walking so that the inmates will be formal and organized. So if they go to have a meal, they will walk like in a lockstep, so in a military style of walking. And then if they go to workshops to work, then they will do this also, and same to going to their cells. So Auburn prisoners labored in congregate workshops. So they're in a group. So they are a workforce, offsetting imprisonment caused by fulfilling private industry contracts. So Auburn is a very, I think, expensive prison. So they allow uh, inmates to work so that they can also provide for themselves. A hidden passageway with small openings surrounded the work area, allowing inspectors and visitors to surreptitiously monitor the inmates. So Auburn originally used congregate cells, but in 1821, Warden William Britton borrowed the concept of solitary cells from the so-called Pennsylvania system. So Auburn system is also inspired by Pennsylvania system in terms of the concept of uh, solitary cells in separation of each inmates inside the prison. Britain designed a unique five-tiered cell block of two rows of single cells placed back to back in the center of the building. So they categorize different offenders. So there is a three-level classification system. So we have the uh, minor offenders, serious offenders, and then the most hardened offenders. So let's start first in the minor offenders. So they are the inmates who committed minor crimes. So labored in workshops during the day, then retired to separate cells at night. So their time is divided into two. So the day time is their work hours, and then at the night or the rest of their free hours is to spend it at their separate cells. Then serious offenders. So alternated their days between solitary confinement and congregate work. So they also work alternately. So most hardened criminals. So the most hardened criminals were placed in solitary confinement without work. So as uh, the classification or category suggests, so they are maybe the most undisciplined criminals or maybe dangerous, so they're not allowed to work, just just like the minor offenders and the serious offenders. So the day and night they will spend their time in their cells. So to ensure that inmates did not corrupt one another, Britain's successor Elam Lins, so the inmates were head shaven, dressed in striped clothing, silently march in lockstep formation to and from their cells for meals and work assignments. So this is what it looks like, the lockstep. So they are compressed, then they are lined in one row. So if they go to work, they walk like this, they look like this. So if they go for meal, and then if they go to their cells. So eventually overcrowding made the silent system unenforceable. So there are more and more criminals or offenders coming into their prison. And Auburn's system of discipline deteriorated into corrupt and lax routines of harsh punishment. So their punishment became so harsh and then their system deteriorated. And then Pennsylvania system. Pennsylvania system or penal method based on the principle that solitary confinement fosters penitence and encourage reformation. So instead of punishing, they are encouraged to reform themselves, the inmates, so that they can go back to the society as a productive and healthy citizen. The idea was advocated by the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons, whose most active members were Quakers. So this is in Philadelphia. So apply this so-called separate philosophy or the idea of solitary confinement. Prisoners were kept in solitary confinement in cells 16 feet high, nearly 12 feet long, and 7.5 feet wide. So this is a very expensive prison because each cell is uh, have the 16 high feet and 12 feet long and 7 feet wide. So it costs a lot of money in building each cell and in accommodating the area. So an exercise yard completely enclosed to prevent contact among prisoners. So they are also not allowed here in Pennsylvania system the inmates to communicate with each other. So silence is uh, their way was attached to each cell. So you can only see the guard here. For example, this is your cell. Then you can only see the guard. You cannot go see your co-inmates. You cannot communicate. You cannot talk with them. So the Pennsylvania system spread until it's predominated in Europe prisons. Critics in the United States argue that it was too costly, so mahal siya, and had deleterious effects on the minds of the prisoners. So murag uh, it will have an effect to the inmates' sanity. Imagine being locked up to your cell day and night, so without communicating with other persons. So the Pennsylvania possess some attributes. So the first attribute is it used isolation to foster penitence, as the imprisoned person had time to reflect on his or her misdeeds. So he was, for example, a prisoner, I mean, an inmate. He had the time, all the time in the world to reflect on his or her misdeeds, his actions, why he committed the crime. So he can think all about that in his or her cell. Attribute to and to feel sorry for his or her misdeeds. Then attribute to it was humanitarian based as it provided better food and health care. So compared to the other systems, um, Pennsylvania was humanitarian because they provided better food and then healthcare also. So they're much better in treating and treating their inmates. Attribute 3. Convicted persons work alone to make goods and learn a trade. So they are also working even though they're inside the prison. Attribute 4, the focus moved from retribution to rehabilitation. So instead of retribution, the inmates were rehabilitated and corrected so that they can, if they are released in the future, they can be productive people and they are already rehabilitated. And 5, deployment of prisoners. So revise implementing rules and regulations of Republic Act number 10575. otherwise known as the Bureau of Corrections Act of 2013. So this is in the Philippines. So reformation of national inmates. So the circumferential reformation programs which will be institutionalized by the Bureau of Corrections for the inmates shall be comprised of the following. So moral spiritual program. So this refers to the moral and spiritual values formation of inmates, which shall be institutionalized by the Directorate for Moral and Spiritual Welfare, DMSW. So which involve the practice of one's religion still. So if you're a Muslim, you can practice and pray inside the prison, and if you're Christian, then you can also practice your religion inside. Education and training program. So this refers to the administration of formal and non-formal education and skills development of inmates, which shall be institutionalized by the Directorate for Education and Training, or the DET. So inmates have access to education inside the prison, so they can hone their skills and develop it. Then work and livelihood programs. So this refers to the administration of skills development programs on work and livelihood to achieve self-sufficiency of inmates in the prison community and for income generation of the agency. So if naara sila sulod sa prison, they can also work and earn money. So they can be self-sufficient and provide for themselves. So sports and recreation programs. So this refers to the administration of physical and recreational engagement to achieve mental alertness and physical agility in the spirit of sportsmanship. So instead of staying inside their cells, they are bored. So the prison introduced the sports and recreation program, so they can have sports tournament or plays or games inside the prison, so they can uh, exercise their mental alertness, their sportsmanship. They can develop friendship and relationship inside the prison with their co-inmates. So this shall be institutionalized by the Directorate for Sports and Recreation, so the DSR. Volunteer participating agencies or non-government organizations, individuals shall be regulated and managed by DSR. Then health and welfare program. This refers to the administration of proper nutrition, hygiene, sanitation, cleanliness, and promotion of good health to inmates. So the inmates are educated, or they are they are educated or given this knowledge to the proper nutrition and their hygiene and sanitation and cleaning their self or their cell, so they would not get sick easily. This also includes appropriate provision of medical care or hospitalization of the sick, so mentally impaired or old age and disabled inmates. This shall be institutionalized by the Directorate for Health and Welfare Services, or the DHWS, and volunteer participating agencies or non-government organization and individuals shall be regulated and managed by DHWS. So if you want to participate and socialize with the program, or be a volunteer, then you will be managed by the DHWS. So this one is, I I mistakenly put the number 5. So the correct one, the correct number 6 is behavior modification program. So this refers to the administration of programs for the character formation of an inmate necessary for effective interpersonal relationship in the prison community. So they can be uh, their behavior can be corrected in this program. Like if you're too aggressive, you're violent, you're anything that would hurt other inmates, they have this program to help you with this, to manage this kinds of emotions and actions. So definitions of terms. Definition of terms. First is inmate. Refers to person confined in jails, prison to serve his or her sentence, or for safekeeping, who is officially called person deprived of liberty. So they are not called prisoners anymore, but person deprived of liberty, or the PDL. Prison refers to a government establishment where national inmates, prisoners serve their sentence. Philippine prisons are also known as penal colonies or prison and penal farms. So the PDL, or the person deprived of liberty, refers to a detainee, inmate or prisoner, or other person under confinement or custody in any other manner. However, in order to prevent labeling, branding, or shaming the use of these or other derogatory words, the term prisoner has been replaced by this new and neutral phrase, or the person deprived of liberty. So instead of calling the person a prisoner, instead you should call them a person deprived of liberty, since it is calling someone a prisoner is too harsh, or an insult to them. So it is considered as a derogatory word. Then reformation refers to the rehabilitation component of the BUCOR, or Bureau of Corrections present corrections system. Shall refer to the acts which ensure the public, including families of inmates and their victims, that released national inmates are no longer harmful to the community. So they are a reformed person. By becoming reformed individuals prepared to live a normal and productive life upon reintegration to the mainstream society. So they are reformed after being in prisons, serving their sentence. Then we have the Bureau of Corrections, refers to the central office and the prison and penal farms, which are known as colonies. The central office, headed by the Director General, has control and supervision over the prison and penal farms. Then we have the forms of punishment. So before we go on to the different types of criminal punishment, we should have the definition of criminal punishment. So criminal punishments are government sanctions imposed on persons convicted of criminal acts. Other forms of punishment not dealt with in this bibliography include measures imposed by parents on their children, by organizations on their members, by employees, and etc. So the primary aim in most civil cases is to compensate the victim. So the victim will be compensated by uh, imprisoning the offender, or the person who caused a crime. Then the standard punishment in ancient Greek and Roman societies were death, slavery, mutilation, corporal punishment, imprisonment, or banishment. So slavery is a very common way of punishing a person in their times in ancient Greek and Roman societies. So in ancient Rome, for example, a person who murdered a close relative was enclosed in a sack with a cock, a viper, a dog, and a monkey, then cast into the sea. So if you have wronged someone within your relatives or you have murdered, then you are punished by being enclosed in a sack. So ibutang ka sa sako. Kani then inside the sack, there are different animals. Uh, there is a cock or manok, a viper, a snake, a dog, and a monkey. So then you are thrown out into the sea. Then that's up to you if you're gonna survive that or you're gonna die in the sea. So that will be your punishment. So different types of criminal punishment. We have the incapacitation. So incapacitation seeks to prevent future crime by physically moving criminals away from society. So the harmful people are being separated. So kaning mga criminals are separated from the society. So they would not or can physically attack more people or do crimes physically. Then banishment was a common penalty in antiquity. So later it was common for colonizing European countries to ship convicts and undesirables overseas. So if you commit a crime for example, in England or in London, then you will be shipped in other countries, so that's banishment. You will not be go near or go to the place again. So findings by the Bureau of Justice Statistics or the BJS have brought the effectiveness of this method into question. According to BJS data, about two-thirds or 67.8% of prisoners released back into society were arrested for a new crime within 3 years. So after they are sentenced or punished, then released to the prisons, or then within 3 years they already committed a crime. So the goal of deterrence. So we have number 2, which is deterrence. So the goal of deterrence is to persuade citizens and possible offenders or re-offenders to conform to the rules of law. So there are 4 types of deterrence are generally recognized by Muth and Liu. So number 1 is specific deterrence analyzes how effective punishment is on an individual's future behavior. So they analyzes how effective a punishment is to an individual's future behavior. So number 2, general deterrence seeks to understand how individual punishment can deter others from committing crimes. So they are observing and seeking to understand so how this punishment can change an individual or deter others from committing crimes. So if you see for example, if someone is imprisoned and they and other person who are also want to or would to commit a crimes, then they see other person that are imprisoned, then they see their conditions there is poor and not so good, so they will think that I'm not gonna do this, I'm not gonna do this anymore, so I'm not gonna do crime, so they can deter a person, an individual, from not committing crime. So that's general deterrence. So marginal deterrence seeks to reconcile how effective different types of punishment are as either specific or general deterrence. Then number 4, partial deterrence refers to situations in which the threat of penalty has some deterrent value even when someone engages in illegal behavior. Then retribution, so the third different type of punishment. So in the book of Criminal Law by Lisa M. Storm, she explains that retribution prevents crime by giving victims or society a certain sense of satisfaction. So, retribution is a way to prevent crime by giving the victim satisfaction na ang person na ni-commit niya na ang person na ni-commit og crime is ma-priso, so ma-feel niya safe siya and nakabalo siya atong tawhana nga ni commit og crime against niya. So for example, a person who robbed you, who took away your belongings and properties. So by imprisoning this person and having the criminal or offender or the robber, they will give back all the stolen properties to you. So the person or the victim will feel satisfied that they took back if mauli pa ang iyang properties, yung mga belongings, yung mga possessions, then ang person is lock up na siya sa prison. So maka-feel ang victim og satisfactions na nakabalo siya ato. Nakabalo siya sa katong nga tawhana. Satisfaction that a defendant has been punished appropriately. So appropriately. And reinforcing the belief that the criminal justice system is working effectively. So by doing this, kaning a sense of justice is being served. So ang victim is makabalo siya sa criminal, and then makatrust pud siya sa criminal justice system because the justice system will be the one to find and to punish the criminal or the offender. So there is a trust between the victim and the criminal justice system. Then retribution, the punishment that someone receives as revenge or revenge. Retribution is revenge for his committing of a criminal act. So he or the victim can revenge to the criminal. For example, retribution may be a judge ordering either a life sentence or the death penalty for someone after convicting him of murdering another person. So makabalos. So life for a life. If you murdered someone, you took their life, then the criminal justice system or the judge will also sentence you to life imprisonment. So you will spend all your remaining years in prison. So that's life for a life. Then rehabilitation is number 4. A common prison policy in America up until the 1970s. Rehabilitation focuses on helping criminals and prisoners overcome the barriers that led them to committing criminal acts. So instead of blaming the person of committing criminal acts, then they would have this the reasons, they look for the reasons why they did what they did. So they have to, for example, a person is an addict, then they the rehabilitation will help them overcome this uh, series of behaviors. So they will help them uh, not do this kind of thing anymore. Then consider the opposite of retribution. So this is the opposite of retribution. So it's not about revenge or giving satisfaction to the victim, but the ultimate purpose of rehabilitation is to transition offenders back into society. So it's not about revenge, but it's about reforming or transitioning the offenders into into the society as a productive person and as a reformed person. Five is restoration, a radically different approach to criminal punishment. The goal of restoration is for the offender to make direct amends to both the victim and the community in which the crime was committed. So restoration, restoring your self, your normal self instead of the criminal self. Your To make amends to the victim or to the community. So during the process of restoration, victims initiate a process in which both they and the offender meet to share feelings and concerns. Then restorative justice is often used in crimes involving youth offenders. So usually these are involving to younger people. So mga juveniles, mga youth offenders, mga bata. So an example is here. Since ang mga bata can be still be redirected to to uh to the light side. So number 6, age of enlightenment. So age of enlightenment. The age of enlightenment was a philosophic movement of the 19th century, marked by a rejection of traditional social, religious, and political ideas. So the the people are already enlightened here. So they also think about the human rights, the proper way of uh, punishing people, the appropriate way of punishing the people instead of excessive punishing or brutal punishing of persons. And then an emphasis on rationalism. So they uh, they have reasons, they emphasize reasons here in age of enlightenment. So French philosophic thinkers Montesquieu and Voltaire epitomize the age of enlightenment's concern for the rights of humanity. So they do not dili nila dili nila tanggap ng mga brutal ways of treating a person. So they have their concerns for the rights of humanity. So this is Francois Marie Arouet, known by his nom de plume, Voltaire. So this is Voltaire. So Montesquieu. So Montesquieu brought the abuses of criminal law to public attention. So crimes against the people nga mga criminals, kanang dili na human ang pag-treat nila sa mga criminals. So he brought it up to the public So he's the one who opened the conversation of reforming these ideas, these traditional ideas, barbaric way of treating criminals. So Voltaire became involved in a number of trials that challenged the old ideas of legalized torture. So torturing of the criminals, criminal responsibility and justice. So Cesar Beccaria. So mga important personalities in institutional corrections. Cesar Beccaria in full, Cesar Bonesana. So D. Beccaria. So born in March 15, 1738, then died in November 28 in 1794. So he was an Italian criminologist and economist whose Crimes and Punishment, his book Crimes and Punishment, was a celebrated volume on the reform of criminal justice. So he was the one to author author the Crimes and Punishment. He was reserved and somewhat taciturn in his social contacts, but placed great value in his personal and family relationships. So he was a reserved person and somewhat taciturn. In 1760, Becarius proposed marriage to the 16-year-old Teresa Blasco, encountered the obdurate opposition of his father. Then the following year, the marriage took place without the parental consent, so they still married each other even though they do not have the blessing of the parents. And the young couple began their life together in poverty. So in 1763, Very suggested that Beccaria next undertake a critical study of the criminal law. Although he had no experience in the administration of criminal justice, Beccaria accepted the suggestion. So in 1764, his great work on crimes and punishment was published. So it was Very that suggested that. So he was able to write on crimes and punishment. The argument of the book is founded on the utilitarian principle that governmental policy should seek the greatest good for the greatest number. He lashed out at the barbaric practices of his day. So, barbaric gitong panahon nila sa una in treating the criminals. So, the use of torture, secret proceedings. So, there are torture happening inside the prison, and that's not a very good sign in. So the caprice and corruption of magistrates, brutal and degrading punishments. So brutal kaayo ang mga punishment nila. So the objective of the penal system, he argued, should be the devised penalties only severe enough to achieve the proper purposes of security in order. Anything in excess is tyranny. So Beccaria was the first modern writer to advocate the complete abolition of capital punishment or the death penalty and may therefore be regarded as the founder of the abolition movement that have persisted in most civilized nations since his day. So he was the way of reforming and abolish these traditions, these barbaric ways, tortures to the persons. So Cesar Lombroso. So Cesar Lombroso was born in November 6, 1835 in Austria and then died in October 1909 in Italy. Italian criminologist whose views, though now largely discredited, brought about a shift in criminology from the legalistic preoccupation with crime to a scientific study of criminals. So studied he studied crimes or criminals scientifically. So this is his contribution to criminology. So Lombroso studied at the universities of Padua, Vienna, in Paris, and from 1862 to 1876, he was a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pavia. So he's the doctor. Lombroso tried to discern a possible relationship between criminal psychopathology and physical or constitutional defects. So his chief contention was the existence of a heredity. So para niya ang crime is inherited. So hereditary ang criminal behaviors. So or atavistic class of criminals who are in effect biological throwbacks to a more primitive stages of human evolution. So human evolution. So his study is maybe inspired by Darwin, Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. So this is the illustration of what Cesar Lombroso's study about. So the genetic throwbacks of more primitive. So muni ang mga para niya in his study that these are the faces or physical features of born criminals. So you have your nose, you have your nose in a shape of this, then you are most likely to be a criminal. If this is the shape of your head, your face structure, then that's the study of Cesar Lombroso. Lombroso, using a scientific approach and concepts drawn from physiognomy, early eugenics, psychiatry, and social Darwinism, argued that criminality was inherited. So it's not the fault of the person why he committed the crime, but from his genetics, which is passed down from his ancestors. So and that the born criminal could be identified by physical defects. So kaning mga inanig mga itsura is considered as the physical defects. So they are the called born criminals, which confirm a criminal as savage or atavistic. So if you have a face like this, then Cesar Lombroso, according to his study, this is categorized or labeled as a savage. So he was very judgmental, I guess. Lombroso tried to reform the Italian penal system, and he encouraged more humane and constructive treatment of convicts through the use of work programs intended to make them more productive members of society. So he also introduced reformations for the Italian penal system. So introduce uh, more humane and constructive treatments of convicts. So among his books are Lo Homo Delinquente, or in 1876, The Criminal Man, and The Crimes and Its Causes and Remedies in 1899. Together with his emphasis on the scientific method, this revolutionary approach has earned Lombroso the title Father of Scientific Criminology. So, William the Conqueror. So, William first by name William the Conqueror or William the Bastard or William of Normandy, French. So he was born in circa 1028 and died in September 9, 1087. So he was a duke. So from 1035 and King of England as William the First. From 1066, one of the greatest soldiers and rulers of the Middle Ages. So he was a great English king. He made himself the mightiest noble in France. So even though he was not born in England, he was the king. He was able to become a king. Later on, we will find out why he became the king of England. So he made himself the mightiest noble in France and then changed the course of England's history by his conquest of that country. So he conquered the country. At only 8 years of age, William became the new Duke of Normandy. So violence and corruption plagued his early reign. As the feudal barons fought for control of his fragile dukedom, a few of William's guards died and his teacher was murdered during a period of severe anarchy. So there is that time, his time was very chaotic and severe. There is a period of severe anarchy. So there's a lot of murder going around. With with the help of King Henry the First of France, William managed to survive the early years. So he was aided by King Henry the First of France. Then, claiming his right to the English throne, William, Duke of Normandy, invades England at Pevensey on Britain's southeast coast. Uh, so his subsequent defeat of King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings marked the beginning of a new era in British history. So he was able to defeat the reigning king of and it was called the Battle of Hastings. So the laws introduced by William the Conqueror after his victory at Hastings in 1066 had an impact on everybody in England. So he introduced laws uh, that can control the people or the country. So he managed to introduce this so that he could control the people and abide by his laws or rules. These laws were introduced by William to control the English. So the first one is only one God will be worshipped throughout the whole of England, and there will be only one faith. So they only have one religion. So this will preserve peace between the English and the Normans, since William the Conqueror is a Norman. All freemen will swear on oath that they will be loyal to the king, so they will be loyal to him. All freemen will swear to defend William against all his enemies. So they have no choice but to pledge their oath or swear an oath to the king, which is William the Conqueror. So all those men who came to England with William in 1066 and after shall be guaranteed their safety. If any of these men are killed, his murderer must be caught within 5 days. If possible, his lord is responsible. If that lord fails to do this, that lord must pay me 46 marks of silver. So the law is pretty much um, based on the men of William the Conqueror. So luoy kayong mga English ani. So if he cannot afford to pay this fine, those who live under his control must pay up to a total of 46 marks of silver. All Frenchmen who shared in the customs of the English when Edward the Confessor was king, shall pay what is called scot and lot. Number 5, no live cattle can be sold outside of cities. When cattle is sold in cities, there must be 3 witnesses to the sale. So if this law is ignored, the person responsible shall be fined the same sum of money as was made in the sale. So number 6, if a Frenchman accuses an Englishman, so there are the French uh, of murder, theft, or perjury, that Englishman shall be allowed to defend himself. So they he William the Conqueror gave uh, or allowing the Englishman to defend himself by ordeal, either by ordeal through combat, so ordeal by combat. So he will defend himself by combating or battling someone from the opposite side, or by ordeal by hot iron. So if that Englishman is too ill to do this, he will find another Englishman to do this in his place. So if he's old or ill or not or cannot do this ordeal, or he cannot defend himself, then he should find another person that would do it for him. So he will be replaced. If an Englishman accuses a Frenchman of a crime and is unwilling to prove his case against the Frenchman by ordeal of combat or hot iron, the Frenchman will be acquitted if he swears an oath of innocence. So, much favored ang mga Frenchman ani against Englishmen. So, this is the way of William the Conqueror to control the English. So, all the laws regarding land and ownership introduced under Edward the Confessor shall be kept alongside those land and laws William has introduced. So, anybody who wants to consider a free man must swear an oath of loyalty. This oath must be guaranteed by others. If this man who has sworn an oath breaks the law, those who have guaranteed his oath must pay any fine that is set against this man. So, this is the law. Any problems should be sorted out in a court of law. If anybody, so these laws that William the Conqueror introduced are very specific and detailed, and any problem should be sorted out in the court of law. If anybody who is summoned to court refuses to attend, he shall receive one warning. So this is a very advanced way of laws. If he refuses to attend a second time, he shall be an ox taken from him. If he fails to attend the third time, he shall have another ox taken from him. So if you have an ox, then it will be taken. So it will be a form of payment of not attending the hearing or the meeting. So if he fails to attend a fourth time, he shall pay a fine to the king and shall have taken from him goods to the value of the original charge against the accused. So number 9, no man is allowed to sell another man. So you cannot sold a person. Anyone breaking this law will pay a fine to the king. And then number 10 is no one shall be executed for crimes they have committed. But if they are guilty of a crime, they will be blinded and castrated. So you will be blind if you are found guilty of committing the crime. This law is not to be challenged. So you cannot question this law, but you are to abide. So number 10 is Enrico Ferri. So Enrico Ferri was born in Lombardy in 1856 and worked first as a lecturer and later as a professor of criminal law, having spent time as a student of Cesar Lombroso. So he was a student of Cesar Lombroso. Then Ferry focused more on social and economic influences on the criminal and crime rates. So Cesar Lombroso focused more on the scientific, so more on science. See Cesar Lombroso, while Ferry is on the social in and economic influences on why the criminals are doing crimes. So Ferry's research led to him postulating theories calling for crime prevention methods to be the mainstay of law enforcement, as opposed to punishment of criminals after their crimes had taken place. So he is more on the prevention methods of the crime than of punishing the criminals. Very favored Italian neutrality during World War One and he was re-elected as a Socialist Party deputy in 1921. So in post-war Italy, he became a supporter of Mussolini's fascist regime. So he was a supporter of Mussolini. Ferry died in 1929. Then we have the last one. The last personality is Clifford Shaw. So Clifford Shaw or Clifford Robe Shaw, 18, 1895 to 1857, was an American sociologist and criminologist. He was a major figure in the Chicago School of Sociology during the 1930s and 1940s and is considered to be one of the most influential figures in American criminology. So he was a major figure in Chicago. So his work on juvenile delinquency, so he works on more on the young ones or the youth offenders. With Henry D. McKay, conducted in the late 1920s, so played a pivotal role in moving the study of such delinquency toward the discipline of sociology. So he interconnected the behavior of the delinquent toward the discipline of sociology and away from psychology and psychiatry. So the social disorganization theory was developed by two sociologists. So one of these is Clifford Shaw, then the other one is Henry McKay, who were connected to the Chicago School of Criminology. So creators theorize that these organization communities are affected by poverty. So more on economic uh, reasons, why in which crime rates and neighborhood ecological characteristics are directly related. So poverty causes crimes. I mean, some reasons. So sociologists established social structure theories in their efforts to connect behavior patterns to social economic control as additional social ecological factors. So poverty is a factor of why individual or why a person can commit a crime and the conditions of the neighborhood or the surrounding area. So that's all for my presentation and discussion. Thank you for listening. That's all. Thank you. Stop share na ni Poy. Oh my God. Kani? Kani?